Tonight, we're going to settle into the winter of 1944, in the forests and fields around a small Belgian town called Bastogne. This is part of the Battle of the Bulge, the last major German offensive on the Western Front in World War II. Over these weeks, Bastogne became the center of a struggle, shaped by cold, hunger, and the weight of waiting, as American soldiers and local civilians found themselves surrounded in the heart of the Ardennes. The story begins in mid-November, before the attack, when the town was quiet and the front lines seemed stable. Bastogne was a crossroads, important for its roads more than its size, and it sat in a landscape of rolling hills, muddy tracks, and dense woods. As winter deepened, the weather turned harsh. The days grew short, and the sky was often heavy with snow. Supplies were already thin, and warmth was hard to find. Then, in December, the German offensive erupted. Within days, Bastogne was cut off, encircled by enemy forces, and the people inside were left to endure cold nights, dwindling food, and the constant threat of attack. The pressure here was not just from the enemy lines closing in, but from the cold that seeped into every shelter, and the silence that settled between moments of chaos. For those inside Bastogne, time slowed to a crawl. Each day was measured in small comforts: a letter from home, a cup of coffee, a patch of dry ground. The isolation was complete. The only way in or out was by air, and even that depended on the weather clearing just enough for planes to reach them. We'll move through these days together, from the uneasy calm before the attack, through the shock of encirclement, to the long days and nights of siege and survival. We'll see how people held on, what they saw and felt, and how the relief finally came, not as a sudden rescue, but as a slow return to hope and connection. There will be no sudden changes in pace or sound. Everything here will stay calm and steady, just as the snow kept falling outside those frozen foxholes. You can let your mind rest as we settle into this winter, and let the world of Bastogne unfold at its own quiet pace. Chapter 1. Bastogne on the eve of winter, mid-November, 15 December 1944. In the waning days of autumn, Bastogne sits quietly in the heart of the Ardennes, its stone buildings and narrow streets nestled among rolling hills and dense forests. The town lies at a crossroads, perched at an elevation that brings it closer to the clouds and the chill of the coming winter. The air is crisp and damp, carrying the scent of wet earth and fallen leaves. Surrounding Bastogne, the landscape undulates with wooded ridges and open fields, the trees standing tall and close together, their bare branches reaching skyward. These forests, thick and shadowed, press in on the town from every direction, shaping the rhythm of daily life and the movement of those who pass through. 7 main roads converge on Bastogne, threading their way through the hills and forests like veins. Each road is narrow, often little more than a ribbon of cracked pavement or packed dirt, winding between stands of fir and beech. The recent rains have left their mark, softening the ground and turning many of the smaller tracks into muddy, rutted paths. The Our River, flowing quietly to the east, forms a natural barrier, its banks swollen from the downpour. Of the roads that cross the river, only the bridge at Dasburg remains truly passable, the others damaged or washed out by the relentless weather. Vehicles and wagons move slowly, their wheels sinking into the mud, the sound of engines muffled by the damp air and the thick woods. The geography of Bastogne shapes every aspect of life here. The town's position in the highlands means that fog often settles in the valleys, blurring the outlines of the distant trees and softening the morning light. The forests offer both shelter and concealment, but they also limit visibility, making it easy to lose one's bearings among the endless trunks. For those tasked with moving supplies, the roads are both a blessing and a challenge. Their convergence in Bastogne makes the town a natural hub for traffic, drawing convoys of trucks and columns of troops. Yet the same roads, hemmed in by forest and vulnerable to the weather, can become bottlenecks, slowing the flow of food, fuel, and equipment. Maps from this period show Bastogne as a small knot at the center of a web, each road radiating outward toward distant villages and the Luxembourg border. The town's location is not grand or imposing, but its practical importance is clear to those who rely on these routes. Every day, drivers and dispatchers check the condition of the roads, watching for signs of washouts or fallen trees. The rain has made their work harder, forcing detours and delays. Yet the need to keep supplies moving is constant, and so the town hums with quiet activity, its streets busy with the comings and goings of military vehicles, horse-drawn carts, and the steady footsteps of those on foot. As the days grow shorter and the nights colder, Bastogne's physical landscape becomes a defining presence. The forests close in, the roads grow slick and treacherous, and the town itself feels both sheltered and exposed. The weather is a daily adversary, shaping routines and testing patience. Yet through it all, Bastogne endures, its stone walls and narrow lanes holding fast against the damp and the cold, its crossroads remaining open, if only just, to the world beyond. Within these boundaries, life continues for the people of Bastogne and the soldiers who pass through. The town is no longer under occupation, but the memory of those years lingers in every corner. Civilians move quietly through their routines, their faces marked by the strain of scarcity and uncertainty. Food is precious, each loaf of bread and bowl of soup carefully measured and shared. In a farmhouse on the outskirts, a Belgian family, father, mother, young son, and little daughter, gathers around a rough wooden table. The room is cold, the fire burning low to conserve the dwindling supply of fuel. Outside, the wind rattles the shutters, carrying with it the distant sounds of trucks and the occasional bark of a dog. American soldiers, far from home, find shelter with these families. They are grateful for the warmth, however meager, and for the simple meals of black bread and thin soup. The soldiers and civilians share the same space, their lives briefly intertwined by circumstance. At night, they huddle together in the farmhouse, the soldiers' uniforms blending with the patched clothing of their hosts. The language barrier is bridged by gestures and smiles, and sometimes by song. On one evening, voices rise together in the dim light, singing familiar tunes, Jingle Bells, Silent Night, echoing softly through the cold air. For a moment, the hardships of the present recede, replaced by a sense of shared humanity. Yet beneath these moments of warmth lies a persistent unease. The town is free, but not truly safe. The memory of German occupation is fresh, its traces visible in the wary glances exchanged between neighbors and the careful way people speak. Some families remember the fear of sudden searches, the rationing of food, the uncertainty of each day. Now, with Allied soldiers in town, there is relief, but also caution. Civilians are grateful for liberation, but they know that peace is fragile. They watch the soldiers with a mixture of gratitude and reserve, uncertain how long this quiet will last. Daily routines are shaped by necessity. Water must be drawn, wood gathered, and food stretched to feed as many mouths as possible. Children help where they can, carrying bundles of sticks or fetching water from the well. The cold seeps into every room, and families ration their fuel, burning just enough to keep the worst of the chill at bay. Some homes are crowded, with relatives or neighbors sharing what little space they have. The market offers little beyond the basics, and rumors of black market goods circulate quietly, though few can afford such luxuries. Evenings are spent close to the hearth, the darkness outside pressing in as the wind whistles through the trees. For the soldiers stationed in Bastogne, life is a mixture of routine and rest. Many have come from hard fighting elsewhere, seeking a brief respite from the front lines. They help with chores, share stories of home, and try to make themselves useful. Some stand guard or patrol the outskirts, their breath visible in the cold night air. Others write letters, their words a lifeline to families far away. The presence of the soldiers is both reassuring and unsettling for the townspeople, a reminder that the war is never far off. Emotional strain is a constant companion. The uncertainty of the future weighs heavily on everyone, though few speak of it openly. There is relief in the small comforts, a warm meal, a shared song, a child's laughter, but also a quiet anxiety that lingers in the pauses between words. The people of Bastogne have learned to endure, to adapt, and to hope, even as they brace themselves against the cold and the unknown. For the Allied forces, the Ardennes is seen as a place of relative calm. The sector is considered quiet, a low-risk area where units can rest and regroup. The 28th Infantry Division, having endured months of hard combat, now occupies the area around Bastogne. Its soldiers are spread thinly across the forested hills, holding a long front along the Our River. The lines are not heavily fortified, but the assumption is that the enemy opposite them is equally worn and unlikely to mount a major attack. Patrols are routine, their purpose more to maintain contact and gather information than to engage in combat. The roads that converge on Bastogne serve as lifelines for the division, bringing in supplies and carrying away the wounded. The town itself functions as a support and transit point, a place where troops can rest, repair equipment, and prepare for whatever comes next. The atmosphere among the soldiers is one of weary routine. They check their weapons, clean their gear, and watch the weather, knowing that the cold and the mud are as much an enemy as any soldier. The winter is harsh, the nights long and dark, but there is little sense of immediate danger. The prevailing belief is that the season will limit any large-scale action, that the forests and the weather will keep both sides in check. On the night of 15 December 1944, Bastogne is quiet. The streets are dark, the only light coming from the occasional window or the glow of a lantern carried by a late traveler. The cold settles over the town, seeping into every crack and crevice. In the farmhouses and barracks, people settle in for the night, drawing blankets close and listening to the wind in the trees. There is no sign of alarm, no hint of the turmoil that lies beyond the horizon. The routines of the day give way to the stillness of night, and Bastogne sleeps, its crossroads silent beneath the winter sky. In these hours, the town is defined by its geography and its people, by the quiet persistence of those who endure the cold and the uncertainty. The roads remain open, the fires burn low, and life continues, shaped by the land and the season. There is no outward sign of crisis, only the steady rhythm of daily life in a crossroads town on the edge of winter. Chapter 2. The Offensive Erupts, 16 through 17 December, 1944. Darkness still clings to the forests of the Ardennes as the morning of December 16, 1944, begins. The air is heavy with mist, muffling the outlines of trees and the distant shapes of villages. In the quiet before dawn, Allied soldiers hold their positions, unaware of the storm about to break. Suddenly, at 5:30, the silence is shattered. A thunderous barrage erupts along a vast front, stretching for miles through the woods and hills. The ground trembles beneath the weight of more than 1,000 guns, their shells tearing through the stillness, exploding in flashes of orange and white. For 90 minutes the bombardment continues, relentless and overwhelming, rolling across the landscape like a tide. The men in the forward lines, many of them American, are caught off guard. The barrage is so intense, so sudden, that it seems to come from everywhere at once. In the dim light, the world narrows to the roar of artillery and the shudder of earth. Some believe this is only a local attack, perhaps a counterstroke in a familiar sector. But the scale is different, greater, more violent, and more sustained than anything they have known in these woods. The mist and the winter cold deepen the confusion. Shells burst among the trees, splintering trunks and sending showers of earth and snow into the air. The dense forest, usually a place of quiet, becomes a labyrinth of noise and danger. As the barrage lifts, German infantry begin to move. The woods, thick with pine and tangled undergrowth, offer cover for their advance. Small groups slip through the trees, using the fog and the broken ground to mask their movement. They appear suddenly, close to Allied positions, sometimes emerging from the shadows with little warning. The Americans, thinly spread and still reeling from the bombardment, struggle to respond. The confusion is made worse by the weather. The mist lingers, blurring the outlines of friend and foe. Voices are muffled, orders are hard to hear, and the usual landmarks are hidden by fog and smoke. Communication falters. Wires are cut by shellfire, radios are unreliable in the thick woods, and runners sent with messages sometimes do not return. In some places, units are isolated, unable to reach their commanders or neighboring positions. The sense of isolation grows as the morning wears on. Some men report hearing only the distant rumble of guns and the closer crackle of small arms, with no clear idea of what is happening beyond their immediate surroundings. The usual rhythms of command and control begin to break down. Orders, when they come, are sometimes contradictory or incomplete, reflecting the uncertainty at every level. Among the soldiers, there is a sense of disbelief. The Ardennes had been quiet for weeks, a place where many expected to rest and recover from earlier battles. Now the forest is alive with movement and noise. Some recall the suddenness of the attack, the way the darkness seemed to come alive with flashes, and the ground shook beneath them. Others remember the confusion, the difficulty of telling where the enemy was, or even where their own lines had gone. The first hours of the offensive are marked by uncertainty and fear, as the scale of the German assault becomes clear only gradually. As the morning turns to midday, the pressure on the Allied front increases. The German advance is not a single wave but a series of thrusts, probing for weak spots, exploiting gaps in the line. The Americans, surprised and outnumbered in many places, begin to give ground. Some units hold for a time, fighting from foxholes and hastily prepared positions, but the weight of the attack is too great. The front bends and buckles, forming a bulge as the Germans push westward through the center of the American line. The sense of order that once held the front together begins to dissolve. Retreat becomes necessary in many sectors. The roads leading away from the front fill quickly with movement. Soldiers withdraw in small groups, some carrying wounded comrades, others leaving behind equipment that cannot be moved. The urgency of the retreat is clear in the hurried steps, the anxious glances over shoulders, and the scattered shouts that echo through the trees. Vehicles, some damaged by shellfire, are abandoned along the verges. Supplies are left behind in the rush to escape the advancing enemy. The forest, once a place of shelter, now becomes a maze of confusion and fear. The weather adds to the chaos. Cold rain and sleet turn the roads to mud, making movement slow and difficult. Trucks and jeeps struggle to find traction, sometimes sliding into ditches or becoming stuck in the churned earth. The poor conditions disrupt supply lines, leaving some units short of food, ammunition, and medical supplies. The sense of disorder grows as the day wears on. Orders are given to fall back, but the routes are not always clear, and the pressure from the enemy is relentless. In some places, units become separated, losing contact with higher headquarters or neighboring formations. Along the roads, the retreat becomes a tide of men and machines. Military vehicles jostle for space with civilian carts and wagons. Refugees, caught in the path of the fighting, join the flow, carrying what they can and searching for safety. The faces of the civilians reflect fear and exhaustion. Some have left their homes with only the clothes they wear, driven by the sound of gunfire and the sight of advancing troops. The roads west of the front become crowded and chaotic, a moving mass of soldiers, vehicles, and families. The noise is constant, engines revving, voices shouting, the distant rumble of artillery. In the confusion, orders are sometimes lost or misunderstood. Some units receive conflicting instructions, unsure whether to hold their ground or continue the retreat. The breakdown in communication is felt at every level, from senior commanders to the men in the ranks. Radios are unreliable, wires are down, and the usual channels of command are disrupted by the speed and violence of the German advance. The sense of control slips away, replaced by a growing anxiety and the urgent need to escape the tightening grip of the enemy. As the day turns to night, the retreat continues. The cold deepens, and the roads become even more treacherous. Headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating faces drawn with fatigue and worry. The movement is slow, hampered by the sheer volume of traffic and the worsening weather. Some vehicles are left behind, their engines stalled, or their tires mired in mud. The sense of urgency is palpable, as everyone moves westward, away from the front that is now lost in darkness and uncertainty. Amid this tide of retreat, one place begins to draw increasing attention. Bastogne, a small town nestled among the hills and forests, sits at the heart of a network of roads. As the German advance pushes westward, the flow of military and civilian traffic converges on this crossroads. Trucks, jeeps, and ambulances stream toward the town, seeking routes to safety or new positions. The roads leading into Bastogne become crowded, the movement steady and unending, as the day of December 17 unfolds. The geography of the region shapes the movement. Bastogne's location at the intersection of several major roads makes it a natural point of convergence. The surrounding countryside is marked by rolling hills and dense woods, with few other towns offering the same access to multiple routes. The winter weather complicates travel, with snow and ice making the roads slippery and dangerous. Vehicles move slowly, headlights flickering in the gloom, as drivers navigate the narrow, winding lanes. Reports begin to circulate among Allied commanders. Bastogne's importance as a crossroads becomes clear in the flow of messages and the movement of units. The town is referenced in communications as a key point for organizing defenses or redirecting traffic. The volume of movement around Bastogne increases through the afternoon and into the night, as more units and refugees arrive. The roads are crowded, the air filled with the sounds of engines and voices, the sense of urgency growing with each passing hour. On the German side, the advance also focuses attention on Bastogne. The 5th Panzer Army approaches the area, drawn by the promise of control over the vital road network. The town's junctions slow the German columns, forcing them to navigate the tangle of routes and the congestion caused by retreating Allied forces and fleeing civilians. The severe winter conditions add to the challenge, with snow and ice making progress difficult for tanks and trucks alike. Observers note the atmosphere in and around Bastogne as the day fades. The town, usually quiet, is now alive with movement. The streets are filled with vehicles, some parked haphazardly, as drivers seek directions or wait for orders. The buildings stand silent, their windows glowing faintly in the winter dusk. The sense of anticipation is heavy, as everyone waits to see what the next hours will bring. The Crossroads, once an ordinary feature of the landscape, now stands at the center of the unfolding drama. Logistical challenges begin to emerge. The sheer volume of traffic strains the capacity of the roads and the town itself. Drivers struggle to find clear routes, and the flow of vehicles sometimes slows to a crawl. Supplies are difficult to move, and the confusion of the retreat makes coordination harder. The winter weather adds to the difficulties, with icy roads and falling snow hampering every effort. By the night of December 17, Bastogne's role as a critical crossroads is unmistakable. The town is surrounded by movement, its streets and roads filled with the evidence of a front in crisis. The attention of both sides is drawn to this place, not yet for defense or occupation, but for the simple fact of its location and the network of roads that radiate from its center. The sense of uncertainty remains, as the night deepens and the outcome of the battle is still hidden in the darkness beyond the town. Chapter 3. The Race to the Crossroads, 17 through 18 December, 1944. The cold of the Ardennes settles in with a quiet, relentless grip, as American columns begin their hurried journey toward Bastogne. The first snowfall has blanketed the landscape, and the air bites with a sharpness that seeps through wool and canvas. Soldiers move through the darkness, their breath curling in the frigid air, boots crunching on frozen ground. The roads are narrow and winding, slick with ice and packed snow, making every mile a test of endurance and patience. Convoys stretch for miles, headlights dimmed and engines rumbling low, weaving through the fog that clings to the valleys and hills. The urgency is palpable, pressed into every order and every hurried step. There is little time to rest, and the pace is unyielding. The journey is not a smooth one. Vehicles sputter and stall in the cold, some breaking down along the roadside, their crews forced to abandon them or work quickly to coax engines back to life. Fuel is precious, and every drop is counted. Trucks and jeeps jostle for space on the crowded roads, sometimes coming to a halt as traffic snarls at crossroads or narrow bridges. The men inside these vehicles are weary, their faces drawn and eyes rimmed with fatigue. Many have not slept for more than a few hours, and the relentless march leaves muscles aching and minds dulled by exhaustion. The biting wind finds every gap in their clothing, and some shiver in uniforms not meant for such bitter weather. Food is scarce, and hot meals are a distant memory. Rations are eaten cold if at all, and water freezes in canteens. Orders come down with a sense of urgency that leaves little room for hesitation. The objective is clear: reach Bastogne as quickly as possible. Communications crackle with terse instructions, the voices of officers strained but determined. There is little time for explanation or reassurance. The men know only that they must move, and move fast. Some try to catch a few moments of sleep as the trucks lurch forward, heads nodding against the cold metal sides. Others stare out into the darkness, watching the snow swirl past, minds racing with questions and worries. The landscape is unfamiliar, and the night seems endless. As the columns press on, the physical toll becomes more apparent. Some soldiers stumble as they dismount, legs stiff and unsteady from hours of cramped travel. The cold gnaws at fingers and toes, and frostbite is a constant threat. Medical supplies are limited, and the wounded from earlier engagements are bundled in blankets, their faces pale and silent. There is little time to tend to them, and the medics do what they can with what they have. The sense of strain is everywhere, on the faces of drivers hunched over steering wheels, on the lips of officers barking orders, in the quiet determination of men who know they must keep moving, no matter the cost. The journey is marked by moments of confusion and frustration. Maps are scarce, and the shifting front lines make navigation difficult. Some units take wrong turns, ending up miles from their intended routes before being redirected. The fog and darkness make it hard to see more than a few yards ahead, and the threat of enemy patrols lingers at the edge of every thought. Yet, despite the chaos, the columns keep moving. There is a sense of shared purpose, a grim resolve that binds the men together as they push through the night. By the time the first units near Bastogne, exhaustion has settled deep into their bones. The journey has been long and punishing, and the men are physically depleted. Yet, they have arrived, drawn by the urgency of their orders and the knowledge that something critical awaits them in the town ahead. The strain of the march lingers in every step, every glance, every quiet word exchanged as they prepare to enter Bastogne. The arrival in Bastogne is marked by a sense of disorientation. The town, nestled among rolling hills and dense woods, is unfamiliar to most of the men. Buildings loom out of the darkness, their windows shuttered against the cold. The streets are quiet, the usual bustle of civilian life, subdued by the presence of soldiers and the distant rumble of artillery. Some civilians linger at doorways, watching the newcomers with wary eyes, their faces etched with worry and fatigue. The infrastructure is strained, with roads clogged by military vehicles and supplies stacked in makeshift depots. There is little time for formal orientation. Units arrive in waves, some in the early hours of the morning, others as dusk falls. The process is hurried and chaotic. Officers try to gather their men, issuing orders as quickly as possible, but information is scarce. Many soldiers have no clear idea of the situation beyond what they have heard in hurried briefings or whispered rumors. Maps are in short supply, and those that exist are often outdated or incomplete. Some men are sent out with only a general sense of direction, told to find their assigned positions as best they can. Confusion reigns in the first hours. Some units find themselves in the wrong part of town, forced to double back through crowded streets. Others wait in cold courtyards or along the roadside, unsure of where to go next. The lack of clear information adds to the tension, and tempers flare as officers and enlisted men alike struggle to make sense of their orders. The town itself is a maze of narrow lanes and stone buildings, and the unfamiliar terrain makes orientation difficult. The presence of civilians adds another layer of complexity, as families seek shelter or try to flee the area, their carts and wagons mingling with military convoys. Despite the confusion, there is little time to rest. Orders come quickly, often with little explanation. Some men are told to move out again, almost as soon as they arrive, directed to new positions on the outskirts of town. Others are assigned to guard key intersections or supply depots, their instructions brief and to the point. The sense of urgency is ever present, pressing down on everyone. There is no time to settle in, no chance to catch up on lost sleep or warm, frozen hands. The men move through the town in small groups, their eyes scanning the shadows, alert for any sign of danger. The first shells begin to fall on Bastogne, a distant thunder that grows steadily closer. The sound echoes through the streets, rattling windows, and sending civilians scurrying for cover. The men pause, listening, their faces tense. The reality of their situation settles in, a sense that they are no longer just passing through, but have arrived at a place of consequence. The town is not yet surrounded, but the threat is close, and every order carries the weight of urgency. In these early hours, the American units are in place, but there is little sense of security. The confusion of arrival lingers, and many men have only a vague understanding of the larger situation. They are tired, cold, and hungry, but there is no time to dwell on discomfort. The focus is on the immediate, finding shelter, organizing supplies, preparing for whatever comes next. The town is a place of uncertainty, its streets filled with the restless energy of men who know they must be ready for anything. As the night deepens, a shift begins to take place. The hurried movement gives way to the first steps of organized defense. Orders are issued to hold key roads and outlying villages, to establish positions along the approaches to Bastogne. Units are assigned to specific sectors, their boundaries marked by landmarks and crossroads. Some men are sent to dig in along the edges of town, their shovels biting into the frozen earth as they begin to prepare hasty fortifications. Others set up roadblocks, using whatever materials they can find, logs, sandbags, abandoned vehicles, to slow any advance. The process is hurried and improvised. There is little time for elaborate preparations, and resources are limited. Yet the sense of purpose is clear. The town is no longer just a waypoint, it has become a place to defend. Commanders move among their men, offering words of encouragement and issuing instructions. Their faces are set with determination, their voices steady. The orders are simple: hold the line, keep the roads open, be ready for anything. Coordination between units is a challenge. The mix of airborne, infantry, and armored forces creates a patchwork of positions, and communication is often slow or incomplete. Some units are unsure of their neighbors, relying on runners or brief radio messages to share information. Yet there is a growing sense of resolve. The men understand that they are part of something larger, that their actions in these first hours will shape what happens next. The mindset among the commanders and their troops shifts as well. There is a recognition that Bastogne is now a defensive objective, a place that must be held at all costs. The urgency of the march has given way to the quiet determination of those who know they must stand their ground. The men settle into their positions, checking weapons and supplies, sharing quiet words with their comrades. The cold is ever present, but it is matched by a sense of purpose. As dawn approaches, the transformation is nearly complete. The town that was once a waypoint has become a stronghold, its defenders positioned along the key approaches, ready to meet whatever comes. The exhaustion of the journey lingers, but it is tempered by resolve. The confusion of arrival fades as orders are clarified and positions are established. The men of the American units, though weary and cold, are now part of a defensive line, holding the crossroads at Bastogne against the uncertainty that lies beyond the horizon. The night is quiet, save for the distant rumble of artillery and the soft murmur of voices preparing for the day ahead. In these hours, the race to the crossroads gives way to the calm before the storm, as Bastogne stands ready, its defenders in place, awaiting whatever the dawn may bring. Chapter 4. Digging in under pressure. 1820 December 1944. The cold settles over the countryside in a heavy, persistent way, pressing into every hollow and fold of the land around Bastogne. The air is thick with fog, and the sky hangs low, a dull grey that seems to press down on the soldiers as they move through the fields and woods. The ground is hard, frozen by the deep winter, and each step crunches with a brittle sound. Men work with numb fingers, their breath curling in the air as they try to dig into the earth. Shovels strike the ground and bounce back, the frost resisting every effort. Some men use their helmets as makeshift tools, chipping away at the surface, trying to carve out shallow foxholes for shelter. The work is slow and exhausting. The cold seeps through gloves and boots, biting at skin and bone. There is little comfort to be found, and the promise of warmth is distant. Around the edges of Bastogne, the defenders gather whatever materials they can find. There are not enough proper tools for everyone, and supplies are thin. Some men scavenge for logs, fence posts, or even doors and shutters from abandoned houses. These are dragged into position to form rough barricades and roadblocks. The effort is hurried and uneven, shaped by necessity and the urgency of the moment. There is little time to plan or perfect. The men work in small groups, sometimes guided by officers, sometimes simply following the instincts of survival. The frozen ground makes it difficult to anchor anything securely, and the barricades are often little more than piles of debris, but they offer some sense of protection. The weather is a constant adversary. Fog drifts through the trees and across the fields, muffling sound and blurring the outlines of men and equipment. The cold is unrelenting, and the dampness creeps into clothing and blankets. Many of the soldiers lack proper winter gear. Some have only thin jackets, and their boots are not made for the deep cold. Fingers and toes grow numb, and faces are raw from the wind. The men huddle together when they can, sharing what little warmth they have. Morale is tested by the elements, as much as by the enemy. The work of building defenses becomes a test of endurance, a struggle not just against the Germans, but against the winter itself. There is little rest. The need to prepare is urgent, and the threat of attack is never far from mind. The men speak in low voices, sometimes cursing the ground or the weather, sometimes falling silent as they work. There are moments of frustration when a shovel breaks or a barricade collapses, but there is also a quiet determination. Each foxhole, each barricade, is a small act of defiance against the cold and the uncertainty. The defenders know that their positions are far from perfect, but they do what they can with what they have. The sense of improvisation is everywhere, from the way men wrap extra socks around their hands, to the way they stack crates and sandbags to block a road. As the defenses take shape, there is a sense of uneasy anticipation. The fog hides much, and the sounds of distant engines or voices drift in and out of hearing. The men keep watch, eyes straining through the gloom, alert for any sign of movement. The work continues through the day and into the night, interrupted only by brief pauses for food or rest. There is little comfort in the knowledge that the lines are thin and the defenses are makeshift, but there is a shared resolve. The men know that they must hold, that every hour spent digging and building may make the difference when the enemy comes. The first signs of the enemy's approach are subtle. There are rumors and scattered reports, but the fog and poor visibility make it difficult to know what is happening beyond the immediate line of sight. The tension grows as the hours pass. Patrols are sent out, moving carefully through the woods and fields, listening for the sounds of engines or the crunch of boots on frozen ground. Sometimes they return with news of German movements, sometimes with nothing but the cold clinging to their uniforms. The uncertainty is as thick as the fog. Then, the quiet is broken. The first sustained engagements begin on the approaches to Bastogne. The Germans probe the defenses, testing the lines with small attacks and bursts of fire. The fighting is close and confused, shapes moving in the mist, the crack of rifles and the rattle of machine guns echoing through the trees. Visibility is poor, and it is hard to tell friend from foe at times. The terrain is unfamiliar, the woods dense, and the fields broken by hedges and ditches. The defenders move from cover to cover, firing and then slipping back, always wary of being flanked or cut off. The intensity of the fighting grows as the Germans press in. There are moments of chaos, when orders are lost in the noise and men must rely on instinct and training. The fog makes it difficult to see more than a few yards ahead, and the sounds of battle seem to come from all directions. Some positions are overrun and then retaken, the lines shifting back and forth. The defenders are stretched thin, forced to cover long stretches of ground with too few men. There is little time to rest or regroup. Ammunition is precious, and every round is counted. In the midst of the fighting, there are moments of confusion and fear. Some men are wounded, calling for help in the darkness. Equipment is lost or abandoned in the rush to fall back or advance. The cold makes everything harder, numbing hands and slowing movements. The wounded shiver as they wait for aid, and the medics work quickly, their breath steaming in the cold air. The strain is evident on every face. Yet, there is also a sense of grim determination. The defenders know that they must hold the line, that the enemy cannot be allowed to break through. The pressure mounts as the attacks continue. The Germans come in waves, sometimes probing, sometimes launching heavier assaults. The defenders respond as best they can, shifting men and weapons to meet each new threat. Communication is difficult, with radios unreliable and runners forced to move through dangerous ground. The fog and darkness make coordination a challenge, and there are moments when units lose contact with each other. Still, the line holds, bent but not broken. As the fighting drags on, the reality of the situation begins to settle in. The initial hope that this might be a brief stand fades with each passing hour. The defenders realize that they are facing a determined enemy, one that is not easily turned back. There are discussions among officers and men, quiet conversations in the cold, about what it will take to hold Bastogne. Orders are given to reinforce positions, to ration supplies, to prepare for a longer fight. The sense of urgency shifts from immediate survival to the need for endurance. The supply situation becomes a growing concern. Ammunition, food, and medical supplies are limited, and the cold makes resupply difficult. The men begin to conserve what they have, sharing rations and making do with less. There is talk of the need to hold out, to resist as long as possible. The sense of isolation grows as the roads become more dangerous and the enemy presses closer. Withdrawal is no longer a realistic option. The defenders know that they are surrounded by increasing German activity, and every path out seems to close a little more with each day. The psychological strain is as real as the physical hardship. The men look to their leaders for reassurance, but there are few easy answers. The orders are clear: Bastogne must be held. There is a sense of shared purpose, a recognition that they are part of something larger than themselves. The men draw strength from each other, from the knowledge that they are not alone in their struggle. The cold, the fog, the enemy, all are faced together. As the days pass, the defenders settle into a grim routine. The work of reinforcing positions continues, even as the fighting rages. There are moments of quiet, when the guns fall silent and the men can catch their breath, but these are brief and uncertain. The sense of being under siege grows, though the full reality of encirclement is not yet clear. The men prepare for the worst, knowing that the coming days will test them in ways they can scarcely imagine. Through it all, the spirit of the defenders endures. The hardships are many, and the odds are daunting, but there is a quiet resolve that runs through the ranks. Each man does what he can, whether digging a foxhole, standing watch, or sharing a scrap of food with a comrade. The sense of duty is strong, and the belief in the importance of their stand gives them strength. The winter is harsh, the enemy relentless, but the defenders of Bastogne hold fast, determined to resist whatever comes. In the cold and the fog, with the sound of distant gunfire echoing through the woods, the men of Bastogne dig in and prepare to face the storm. The days are long and the nights are longer, but the line holds. The defenders know that the struggle is far from over, and that the hardest tests may still lie ahead. For now they endure, drawing strength from each other, and from the knowledge that they are not alone in the darkness. The defense of Bastogne has begun in earnest, and the resolve of its defenders is as unyielding as the frozen ground beneath their feet. Chapter 5. Encircled at Bastogne, 2021 December 1944. The morning of December 20th dawns cold and grey over Bastogne. The landscape is hushed, the air heavy with the threat of snow. Along the roads leading into the town, the last traces of movement are tense and hurried. American vehicles, battered and mud-splattered, push through the outskirts, their engines straining against the deepening chill. Soldiers move with purpose, eyes scanning the tree lines and distant fields for any sign of the enemy. The sense of urgency is unmistakable. Each hour, the routes grow more dangerous, the windows for passage narrower. The roads' lifelines for supplies, for reinforcements, for hope, are slipping away. To the south and southwest, German forces press forward with relentless determination. Their armored columns and reconnaissance units probe the American defenses, seeking weak points, testing the resolve of those within. Near the artillery positions outside Bastogne, the threat becomes immediate. Panzer reconnaissance vehicles, their engines rumbling, nearly break through, only to be met by a hastily assembled line of defenders. The clash is brief and desperate. The defenders hold, but the message is clear. The enemy is closing in, and the margin for escape is vanishing. By midday on December 21st, the transformation is complete. All 7 highways that once connected Bastogne to the outside world are now severed. The last convoys attempting to reach the town are turned back or forced to scatter. Supply trucks, once a common sight, are absent from the roads. The flow of ammunition, food and medical supplies is abruptly halted. The only movement now is within the shrinking perimeter, as soldiers and vehicles reposition to meet the tightening ring. The landscape around Bastogne is marked by churned earth, broken fences, and the tracks of retreating vehicles. The fields and woods, once open and familiar, have become a barrier, an uncertain no-man's land, dominated by the enemy. Inside the town, the realization settles with a quiet finality. The defenders and inhabitants sense the change before it is spoken aloud. The usual sounds of distant traffic and the occasional rumble of friendly armor are gone, replaced by an uneasy silence. The sky above is a low, unbroken grey, the promise of snow hanging heavy. Near Longchamps, to the north, the first flakes begin to fall, dusting the ground and softening the outlines of trees and buildings. The cold deepens, seeping into every corner, every shelter, every breath. Maps and situation reports circulate among the command staff. The lines drawn in pencil and ink now form a closed ring around Bastogne, the town at the center of a tightening noose. Officers gather in makeshift headquarters, studying the shifting front, searching for any sign of relief or weakness in the enemy's encirclement. The reports are unanimous. The town is surrounded. There are no open roads, no safe passages, no way out. The perimeter is complete. Attempts to communicate with the outside world become more urgent. Radios crackle with static. Operators hunched over their sets, straining to catch a signal, a message, a word from higher command. The silence is oppressive. Occasionally, a faint transmission breaks through, but the connection is fleeting, the words indistinct. The defenders are left to rely on their own resources, their own judgment, their own resolve. Within the perimeter, the mood shifts. The knowledge of encirclement spreads quietly, carried in hushed conversations and the subtle changes in routine. Soldiers gather in small groups, sharing cigarettes and stories, their voices low. The civilians, shopkeepers, farmers, children, move about the town with a new wariness. The familiar streets feel altered, the sense of safety replaced by a growing uncertainty. The first shells had fallen days earlier, but now the threat feels constant, the danger immediate and inescapable. There is no single moment of announcement, no formal briefing to declare the siege. Instead, the realization comes gradually, settling over the town like the falling snow. The officers and enlisted men alike understand what has happened. The lines are closed. The outside world is distant, unreachable. The town is alone. In the command posts, leaders confer quietly, their faces drawn and serious. The loss of access weighs heavily on the logistical officers. Supplies are inventoried with new urgency. Ammunition is counted and recounted. Medical stores are checked, rationed, and set aside for emergencies. The routines of daily life are altered. Meals become simpler, portions smaller. Water is conserved, fuel carefully measured. The defenders adapt, their focus shifting from movement and maneuver to endurance and conservation. Morale is tested by the isolation. Some soldiers write in their diaries, recording their thoughts and fears. The words are spare, the tone subdued. There is uncertainty, but also a sense of resolve. The men of the 101st Airborne Division, the armored infantry, and the supporting units know the importance of their stand. They draw strength from each other, from the knowledge that they are not alone in their struggle. The civilians, too, find ways to cope. Families gather in cellars and shelters, sharing what little they have, offering comfort and support. The weather adds to the hardship. The snow falls steadily, blanketing the town and the surrounding fields. The cold is unrelenting, biting through clothing and seeping into bones. Fires are lit wherever possible, the smoke rising in thin columns above the rooftops. The streets are quiet, the usual bustle subdued by the weight of the siege. The landscape is transformed, the familiar landmarks softened by snow and silence. As the day fades into night, the sense of isolation deepens. The sounds of battle echo from the outskirts, the distant rumble of artillery, and the sharp crack of rifles. Within the town, the defenders move quietly, conserving their strength, preparing for whatever may come. The perimeter is watched closely, every approach guarded, every avenue of attack anticipated. The town is a fortress, its defenders determined to hold. The siege condition is now fully established. Bastogne is cut off, its defenders and civilians isolated from the outside world. The routines of defense take on a new rhythm, shaped by the constraints of the siege. Patrols are sent out to probe the enemy lines, to gather information, to maintain a sense of control. Supplies are managed with care, every item accounted for, every resource stretched to its limit. Attempts to re-establish contact with Allied forces continue, but the results are uncertain. The radios offer little comfort, their signals weak and unreliable. The fog and snow hinder any hope of air support or resupply. The town is enveloped in a cocoon of silence, the outside world distant and unreachable. The environment itself becomes a part of the siege. The snow muffles sound, softening the edges of the town and the fields beyond. The cold is a constant companion, a reminder of the hardship faced by those within. The buildings bear the scars of shellfire, windows shattered, walls pitted and scarred. The streets are empty, save for the occasional patrol or the hurried movement of messengers. Official orders are issued to adapt to the new reality. Defenses are strengthened, positions reinforced. The defenders settle into their roles, each man and woman aware of the importance of their actions. The town becomes a community under siege, united by necessity, bound by the shared experience of isolation. Inside Bastogne, life continues in the shadow of encirclement. The routines of defense and survival blend together, each day marked by the same challenges, the same uncertainties. The defenders and civilians alike draw on reserves of courage and determination, finding strength in each other and in the knowledge that they are holding firm against overwhelming odds. The outside world is silent, the lines of communication severed. The town stands alone, its fate uncertain, its defenders resolute. The siege has begun, and Bastogne endures, isolated and unbroken. Chapter 6. The Surrender Demand, 22 December 1944. The morning of December 20 the Meath brings a strange and unexpected stillness to the battered outskirts of Bastogne. The usual thunder of artillery and the sharp crack of rifles fade, replaced by a tense quiet that settles over the snow-covered fields and battered buildings. Along the American lines, soldiers peer out from foxholes and behind ruined walls, their breath hanging in the cold air, uncertain of what this sudden pause might mean. The silence is not comforting. It is heavy, filled with anticipation and the uneasy knowledge that something unusual is unfolding between the lines. From the German side, a small group emerges, moving carefully across the open ground. Their approach is marked by a white flag, a clear signal of truce, recognized by both sides, even in the chaos of battle. The flag stands out starkly against the winter landscape, fluttering gently as the emissaries advance. American sentries watch their progress with suspicion and curiosity, weapons held ready but not raised. The rules of war, even here, demand a certain respect for the flag of truce, and so the lines hold their fire. The German officers are dressed in regulation uniforms, their movements deliberate and formal. They carry a message, 2 sheets of paper, one in German and one in English, the German copy marked by careful handwritten diacritical marks. Their faces are set, betraying little emotion as they close the distance to the American positions. Major Jones, an American officer, steps forward to meet the emissaries. The exchange is brief and formal. The Germans present their demand, a typewritten ultimatum calling for the surrender of all American forces in and near Bastogne. The message is clear and direct, accompanied by a strict 2-hour deadline for a response. The truce is observed with a wary respect, the tension between the two sides palpable in the cold air. For a moment, the violence of the siege is suspended, replaced by the ritual of negotiation and the weight of the message now in American hands. As the German officers turn and retrace their steps, the stillness lingers. Soldiers on both sides remain alert, uncertain of what will follow. The truce flag is lowered, and the lines remain quiet, the usual sounds of war replaced by the distant crunch of boots on snow and the low murmur of voices. The surrender demand is now on its way to the heart of Bastogne, carried by Major Jones through the maze of defensive positions and battered streets. The brief pause in fighting is a fragile interlude, its significance hanging in the air as the message is delivered to American headquarters. Inside Bastogne, the atmosphere is tense and focused. The message arrives at the headquarters of Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe, the American commander. The room is crowded with officers and staff, the air thick with the smell of sweat, coffee, and cigarette smoke. The demand is handed over, and attention turns immediately to its contents. Lieutenant Colonel Harry Kinnard, the division operations officer, is present as the document is read aloud. The words are stark. The Americans are surrounded by strong German armored units, and surrender is demanded to avoid total annihilation. The threat is explicit. If the demand is refused, a German artillery corps and 6 heavy anti-aircraft battalions stand ready to destroy the defenders of Bastogne. There is a moment of confusion as the message is first read. General McAuliffe, tired and under immense pressure, misinterprets the demand at first. He asks, almost incredulously, "They want to surrender." The correction comes quickly. It is not the Germans who are offering to give up, but rather they are demanding that the Americans do so. The realization settles over the room, and for a moment the officers exchange glances, weighing the gravity of the situation. The language of the demand is formal, almost cold, its tone both threatening and absolute. The deadline is clear: 2 hours to decide the fate of the garrison, and the thousands of men now trapped within the ring of German forces. The document is passed from hand to hand, read and reread. The translation is straightforward, but the implications are profound. There is no ambiguity in the threat, no room for negotiation or compromise. The officers discuss the message in low voices, some shaking their heads, others quietly resolute. The mood is tense, but not panicked. There is a sense of disbelief at the audacity of the demand, mingled with a grim determination. The men in the room know the stakes. They understand the danger, but surrender is not a word that sits easily on their tongues. General McAuliffe's response is swift and memorable. With a mixture of frustration and defiance, he utters a single word: nuts. The word hangs in the air, a succinct expression of his refusal to consider surrender. The officers around him react with a mix of amusement and approval. The reply is quickly adopted as the official response. It is brief, almost cryptic, but it captures the spirit of the defenders. The message is written out, NUTS, followed by the American commander. There is no need for further explanation. The meaning is clear to those who receive it, even if it baffles the German officers who will soon read it. The process of delivering the reply is handled with the same formality as the original demand. The written response is prepared and entrusted to be carried back across the lines. The atmosphere inside headquarters shifts from tense uncertainty to a kind of grim satisfaction. The decision has been made. The demand has been answered. There is no surrender, no negotiation, only the resolve to hold out against whatever comes next. The officers and staff return to their duties, the brief interruption over, the reality of the siege pressing in once more. Outside, the truce comes to an end. The German emissaries receive the American reply, and return to their own lines. The white flag is lowered, and the fragile peace of the past hour dissolves. The sounds of war return abruptly. The first shells begin to fall again, their explosions echoing through the ruined streets and shattered buildings. The defenders of Bastogne brace themselves, returning to their positions, weapons at the ready. The siege resumes with renewed intensity, the German artillery unleashing a fresh barrage against the American lines. Among the troops and civilians inside Bastogne, word of the refusal spreads quickly. There is no elaborate announcement, but the message is understood. The American commander has rejected the German ultimatum. The defenders are to hold their ground. The mood is tense but resolute. There is no sign of panic or despair. Instead, there is a sense of shared purpose, a quiet determination to endure whatever the enemy may bring. Orders are issued to maintain defensive positions, to remain alert, and to prepare for renewed attacks. The lines are checked, ammunition distributed, and the routines of defense resumed. The shelling continues, shaking the ground and sending plumes of smoke and debris into the air. The defenders hunker down, waiting out the barrages, listening for the telltale sounds of infantry movement or armored vehicles. The return to siege conditions is abrupt and total. The brief pause for negotiation is already fading into memory, replaced by the familiar rhythms of survival and resistance. The refusal to surrender is now part of the lived reality for everyone inside Bastogne, shaping their actions and their outlook as the siege grinds on. In the cold and darkness, the defenders of Bastogne settle back into their positions. The day's events have left their mark, but the resolve of the garrison remains unbroken. The German demand has been answered, not with capitulation, but with defiance. The siege continues, the outcome uncertain, the struggle far from over. The night falls over Bastogne, the sounds of battle echoing through the town, as soldiers and civilians alike brace themselves for whatever the next day may bring. The refusal to surrender stands as a quiet statement of determination, echoing in the hearts of those who hold the line. Chapter 7. Life Inside the Siege, 22-24 December, 1944. Within the battered town of Bastogne, the days from December 22nd to December 24th unfold with a quiet, relentless pressure. The perimeter holds, but inside, the world has shrunk to a handful of streets, cellars, and foxholes. The air is heavy with the scent of earth, smoke, and the faint lingering aroma of rations stretched thin. Each morning, soldiers and civilians alike wake to the same reality. Supplies are dwindling, and every action must be measured against the need to conserve what little remains. There is no abundance here, only careful calculation and the hope that what is left will last another day. Food is precious. Meals are no longer about satisfaction, but survival. The men and women inside Bastogne have learned to make do with less. Rations are divided with precision, each portion weighed and distributed, under the watchful eyes of officers and non-commissioned officers. The routines of meal preparation have become rituals of endurance. A can of meat, a handful of crackers, a cup of weak coffee, these are shared in silence, the taste secondary to the knowledge that there is still something to eat. Hunger is a constant companion, gnawing at the edges of every thought, but it is kept at bay by discipline and the quiet determination to endure. Water, too, is rationed. Every drop is accounted for, every canteen filled with care. There are no luxuries, no long drinks to quench a deep thirst. Instead, there are measured sips, each one a small relief. The cold makes thirst less urgent, but it does not erase it. Soldiers and civilians alike learn to ignore the dryness in their mouths, to focus on the tasks at hand. The routines of daily life have narrowed to the essentials: eat, drink, keep warm, and wait. Fuel is perhaps the most precious commodity of all. The cold presses in from every side, seeping through walls and clothing, biting at fingers and toes. Fires are rare and carefully tended. Wood is scavenged from ruined buildings, broken furniture, and any scrap that can be found. Sometimes a barn offers a brief respite, its hay and timber providing warmth for a few hours. But even these moments are fleeting. The need to conserve is ever present, and the fear of running out lingers in every conversation. There is no waste. Every ember is cherished, every bit of warmth, a small victory against the winter. Ammunition is guarded with equal care. Each bullet, each shell, is counted and stored. There is no room for wasteful fire. Soldiers check their weapons, clean them, and count their rounds with a sense of responsibility that goes beyond duty. The knowledge that resupply is uncertain weighs heavily. Every shot fired is a decision, every burst of gunfire, a reminder that the margin for error is shrinking. The routines of defense have become rituals of conservation. Patrols are cautious, and every engagement is measured against the need to hold out. The effects of deprivation are visible in every face. Eyes are sunken, cheeks hollow. The cold and hunger sap strength, making even simple tasks feel monumental. Yet there is little complaint. Instead, there is a quiet acceptance, a shared understanding that everyone is enduring the same hardships. Morale is a fragile thing, but it persists. There are moments of laughter, small jokes shared over a meager meal, or a song hummed softly in the dark. These moments are precious, reminders of life beyond the siege. Inside the perimeter, adaptation is constant. Soldiers and civilians alike find new ways to stretch what little they have. Some barter small items, an extra pair of socks, a bit of chocolate, a few cigarettes for a favor or a scrap of food. Others scavenge through the ruins, searching for anything that can be repurposed. A broken chair becomes firewood. A tin can is fashioned into a cup. Nothing is wasted. Every object is seen for its potential, every scrap a resource to be used. Official communications echo the reality of scarcity. Orders are given to conserve, to stretch supplies as far as possible. There is no promise of relief, only the steady insistence that discipline and ingenuity will see them through. The routines of command are as measured as those of the rank and file. Reports are made, inventories checked, and every decision is weighed against the need to endure. Within this world of scarcity, the medical stations become islands of quiet struggle. Aid stations are crowded, their rooms filled with the wounded and the weary. The air is thick with the scent of antiseptic, blood and sweat. Beds are scarce, and many lie on the floor, wrapped in blankets or coats. The staff move quietly, their faces drawn but determined. Doctors and medics work with what they have, improvising when supplies run low. Bandages are reused, morphine is rationed, and every decision is a matter of necessity. The wounded bear their pain with stoicism. Some whisper prayers, others stare at the ceiling, lost in their own thoughts. There is little privacy, but there is a sense of shared endurance. The staff do what they can to ease suffering. When morphine runs short, they offer words of comfort, a hand to hold, or a quiet song. Infection is a constant threat, and the lack of supplies makes every wound more dangerous. Yet the work continues, each act of care, a small defiance against the hardship that surrounds them. On Christmas Eve, the atmosphere in the aid stations is heavy with both hope and sorrow. Some of the wounded gather for a mass in town, their faces illuminated by candlelight. The strains of Silent Night drift through the air, and for a moment, the war seems far away. Tears are shed, not just for pain, but for the memory of home and the longing for peace. The staff pause in their work, listening to the music, drawing strength from the shared moment of solace. But the reality of war is never far. As night falls, the sound of explosions shatters the fragile calm. Bombs fall, and the aid stations are not spared. In the chaos, lives are lost, and the wounded are once again at the mercy of forces beyond their control. Yet even in the aftermath, the work continues. The staff move among the injured, offering what comfort they can, their resilience undiminished by the violence that surrounds them. Outside, the rhythm of siege life continues. The days are marked by the steady drumbeat of artillery and the sharp crack of gunfire. On December 23rd, the lines come under heavy mortar barrages. The right flank is especially active, the sounds of battle echoing through the town. Each barrage is followed by a tense silence, a brief lull before the next wave of violence. The defenders have learned to read the patterns, to anticipate the moments of danger and the fleeting intervals of calm. Foxholes and cellars become refuges. Soldiers press themselves against the earth, seeking shelter from the shells that rain down. The ground shakes, and the air is filled with dust and debris. In these moments, time seems to slow. Each second is stretched, each heartbeat a reminder of survival. The monotony of waiting is broken only by the sudden violence of bombardment. Fatigue settles over the defenders, a weight that grows heavier with each passing hour. The passage of time is marked by routine. Meals are eaten at the same hour, patrols are sent out, and reports are made. The repetition becomes a comfort, a way to impose order on chaos. Yet beneath the surface, exhaustion grows. Sleep is snatched in brief intervals, interrupted by the sounds of battle. The mind drifts, thoughts turning to home, to loved ones, to the world beyond the siege. The approach of Christmas is felt in small ways. A whispered greeting, a memory shared, a song hummed in the dark. As Christmas Eve arrives, the sense of anticipation is palpable. There is no feast, no celebration, only the hope that the night will pass quietly. Yet the violence does not abate. Artillery shells explode around the foxholes, the ground trembling with each impact. The sky is lit by flashes, and the air is filled with the roar of explosions. In the darkness, soldiers huddle together, seeking comfort in each other's presence. The vigil of Christmas begins, not with joy, but with endurance. Corporal Frank D. Vari remembers this night with clarity. Pressed against the walls of his foxhole, he listens as shells explode around him, the noise unending. There is no escape, only the determination to hold on, to survive until morning. The night stretches on, each hour marked by the rhythm of bombardment and the quiet resolve of those who endure it. Within the town, the same pattern repeats. The wounded lie in their beds, the staff move quietly among them, and the sounds of battle echo through the walls. The air is thick with tension, but also with a sense of shared purpose. Each person, soldier or civilian, finds their own way to mark the passage of time. Some count the hours, others focus on small tasks, each action a way to hold back despair. As the night deepens, the hope for relief remains unspoken. There are no promises, only the knowledge that they have survived another day. The siege is unbroken, the hardships unchanged. Yet within the darkness, there is a quiet strength. The routines of survival, the acts of care, and the moments of shared humanity become the foundation on which endurance is built. In these days, life inside Bastogne is defined by scarcity, by the constant pressure of deprivation and danger. Yet it is also marked by resilience, the ability to adapt, to care for one another, and to find meaning in the smallest acts of kindness. As Christmas Eve draws to a close, the defenders and civilians of Bastogne remain, holding fast against the night, their spirits unbroken amid the siege. Chapter 8. Christmas in Encirclement, 24–25 December, 1944. Christmas in Bastogne arrived quietly, almost as if the day itself hesitated to announce its presence amid the siege. In the darkness of Christmas Eve, the world was reduced to the cold, hard earth of foxholes and the distant silhouette of a church steeple. Corporal Frank D. Very pressed himself against the frozen walls of his shelter, the ground trembling with each shell that burst nearby. The night was long and restless, filled with the sharp, sudden thunder of artillery and the low, anxious murmur of men waiting for dawn. There was no festive glow, no warmth of hearth or home, only the persistent, bone-deep chill and the knowledge that the enemy was near. Yet, even in these conditions, small gestures of remembrance found their place. As the sun rose on Christmas Day, its pale light revealed the steeple of a church down in the valley, a quiet symbol of faith and continuity. Some American soldiers gathered for Christmas services, led by the army chaplain. The words spoken were familiar, echoing traditions from home, but their meaning felt sharper, more urgent, in the cold air and under the threat of bombardment. The service was brief, subdued, and deeply personal. Each man carried his own memories of Christmases past, of laughter, warmth, and family into the present moment, holding them close as a shield against fear and loneliness. In the town itself, Belgian families opened their doors to American soldiers. On Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, these quiet acts of hospitality offered a fleeting sense of normalcy. The sharing of a meal, a few words in broken English or French, and the simple presence of others around a table became precious gifts. There were no grand celebrations, no elaborate feasts. Instead, there was the gentle exchange of what little could be spared: a piece of bread, a cup of coffee, a smile. These moments, though small, carried immense weight. They were reminders that kindness could persist, even when the world outside was filled with violence. The reality of the siege, however, was never far away. As dusk fell on Christmas Eve, the sound of Luftwaffe bombers grew louder, their engines a grim counterpoint to the quiet prayers and whispered greetings. At around 7 in the evening, bombs fell upon Bastogne, striking an aid station and ending the lives of 21 people. The shock of the explosion rippled through the town, a stark reminder that even the most sacred days were not immune to war's reach. For many, the holiday was marked not by celebration, but by loss and the struggle to endure. Throughout these hours, thoughts of home and family surfaced in the quiet spaces between danger. Some men wrote letters, their words heavy with longing and hope. Others simply closed their eyes and tried to remember the sound of familiar voices, the scent of pine, the taste of a favorite meal. The contrast between memory and reality was sharp. Christmas, once a time of comfort and joy, had become a day of survival. Yet, in the sharing of food, the gathering for prayer, and the silent companionship of fellow soldiers and townspeople, the spirit of the holiday endured in muted but unmistakable ways. The world outside the foxholes was transformed by winter's grip. The air was bitterly cold, with temperatures dropping to 7 degrees below zero. Snow and frost coated the ground, muffling footsteps and softening the outlines of ruined buildings. Soldiers huddled in their cotton field jackets and wool coats, their breath rising in clouds as they scanned the horizon for movement. The line they defended stretched for 75 miles, a fragile barrier against the enemy's advance. Every hour brought new challenges, as shells exploded nearby and the threat of attack remained constant. On Christmas Day, the sights and sounds of Bastogne were a study in contrasts. The sun rose slowly, casting a pale gold light over the battered landscape. From his position, Corporal Very watched as the first rays illuminated the church steeple in the valley below. It was, he later recalled, a beautiful day, the kind of morning that might have inspired hope, had it not been for the circumstances. The sound of artillery was ever present, the explosions echoing across the fields and through the shattered streets. German guns fired with such precision that the shells seemed to land at the very moment their departure was heard, a disorienting and terrifying effect. The emotional atmosphere was shaped by this constant tension. There was disappointment, a sense of something precious lost. Many soldiers had looked forward to Christmas as a brief respite, a chance to remember happier times. Instead, they found themselves clinging to small comforts and trying to make sense of the day's meaning. Some coped by focusing on routine, cleaning weapons, checking supplies, sharing a joke or a story when the opportunity arose. Others withdrew into themselves, their thoughts turning inward as they tried to block out the noise and cold. For those who could, the beauty of the morning offered a momentary escape. The clear sky, the sunlight on snow, and the distant village seemed almost unreal against the backdrop of war. It was a reminder that the world continued, that beauty and peace still existed somewhere beyond the reach of artillery. Yet, the reality of the siege was never far away. The sounds of battle intruded on every quiet moment, and the knowledge of danger pressed in from all sides. The mood among the soldiers was complex, a mixture of resignation, determination, and quiet longing. Some found solace in the company of friends, sharing memories of home and dreams of return. Others struggled with the weight of disappointment, the gap between what Christmas had once meant and what it had become. The cold, the hunger, and the fear were constant companions, but so too was a sense of endurance. Each man found his own way to cope, drawing strength from faith, friendship, or the simple act of surviving another day. As Christmas Day unfolded, subtle changes began to appear in the environment. After 9 days of heavy fog and low visibility, the weather began to clear. The sun rose higher in the sky, its light growing stronger and more persistent. The air felt different, crisper, less oppressive. From the foxholes, soldiers could see farther than they had in days, the outlines of trees and buildings emerging from the mist. The improved visibility brought a sense of relief, a small but significant shift in the rhythm of the siege. The change in weather did not go unnoticed. Conversations among the men turned to the clearing sky, the warmth of the sun on their faces, and the possibility that the worst of the winter might be passing. There was no open celebration, but a quiet sense of anticipation crept into the air. The landscape itself seemed to breathe more easily, the oppressive weight of fog and darkness lifting, if only for a moment. Some soldiers remarked on the beauty of the day, the way the sunlight transformed the battered town and the surrounding fields. The clear sky allowed for a better view of the distant village, the church steeple standing as a silent witness to all that had passed. The sounds of battle continued, but they seemed less overwhelming in the brightness of the morning. The world felt larger, the horizon wider, and the sense of isolation less complete. Within Bastogne, the mood shifted subtly. The improved weather brought a renewed sense of alertness, as well as a cautious hope that conditions might continue to change. There was no certainty, only the awareness that the siege persisted, and that each day brought new challenges. Yet the clearing sky and the warmth of the sun offered a reminder that nothing remained the same forever, not even in the midst of war. As the day drew to a close, the atmosphere within Bastogne was marked by a quiet resilience. The hardships of the siege remained, but so too did the small acts of kindness, the moments of reflection, and the enduring hope for better days. Christmas had come and gone, not with celebration, but with endurance and adaptation. The soldiers and townspeople of Bastogne had found ways to acknowledge the holiday, to remember what mattered, and to carry on in the face of adversity. In the fading light, the church steeple in the valley stood out against the sky, a symbol of faith and continuity amid chaos. The sounds of artillery echoed in the distance, but the air was clearer, the world more visible. The siege was unbroken, the challenges undiminished, but the spirit of those within Bastogne remained steady. Christmas had left its mark, not in gifts or feasts, but in the quiet strength of those who endured. Chapter 9. Clear Skies and Falling Supplies, 25–26 December 1944. The morning of December 25th, in Bastogne arrives with a subtle change. For days, the town and its defenders have been shrouded beneath a heavy, unbroken ceiling of cloud and fog. The air has been thick, muffling sound, and dimming the weak winter daylight. Now as dawn unfolds, the sky begins to lighten in a way that feels unfamiliar. The clouds, once pressed low and unyielding, start to thin. Patches of pale blue appear overhead, tentative at first, then growing wider as the morning progresses. The sun, long absent, sends faint rays through the thinning cover, casting a cold, silvery light over the battered town and the surrounding woods. The change in atmosphere is immediate and profound. The world feels larger, the horizon stretching farther than it has in days. The outlines of ruined buildings and distant tree lines sharpen. Soldiers and civilians alike notice the difference. The air, still bitterly cold, carries sound more clearly now. The distant rumble of artillery, the crack of rifle fire, and the occasional shout echo more distinctly across the snow. The oppressive sense of enclosure, built up by days of fog and darkness, begins to lift. For those huddled in foxholes and cellars, the clearing sky brings a new awareness of the world beyond their immediate suffering. The harshness of the winter remains. Temperatures at night have plunged far below freezing, reaching depths that sap strength and numb fingers and toes. Many of the American soldiers have endured these nights with little more than thin uniforms and whatever scraps of warmth they can find. The cold bites at exposed skin, and the snow crunches underfoot, brittle and dry. Yet, as the sky opens, there is a subtle shift in posture and routine. Men step out from their shelters to scan the sky, shading their eyes against the unfamiliar brightness. Some speak quietly among themselves, voices carrying a note of anticipation. The clearing weather is more than a relief from gloom. It is a signal that the world outside Bastogne is stirring. As the morning advances, the first distant drone of engines becomes audible. Eyes turn upward, searching the sky for shapes against the pale blue. The sound grows, swelling into a steady, unmistakable hum. Soon, the silhouettes of Allied aircraft appear, glinting in the sunlight as they circle above the town and its battered outskirts. For days, the defenders have waited for this moment, knowing that only clear skies could bring help from above. Now the presence of planes overhead is both a reassurance and a cause for excitement. Some men wave or shout, their voices rising above the background noise of war. Others simply watch in silence, their faces turned skyward, hope mingling with exhaustion. The arrival of aircraft changes the rhythm of the day. Where routines had been shaped by scarcity and caution, there is now a sense of expectation. The defenders prepare for what may come, adjusting positions and scanning the fields and woods for signs of activity. The enemy, too, seems to respond to the change. The pattern of artillery fire shifts, with bursts of shelling aimed at open ground and suspected drop zones. The soundscape of Bastogne is transformed, the roar of engines and the crack of gunfire weaving together in a tense, unpredictable pattern. Within the town, civilians and soldiers alike sense that something important is unfolding. The clearing skies have brought not only light and sound, but the possibility of relief. The atmosphere is charged with anticipation, each moment stretching as eyes remain fixed on the sky. The defenders of Bastogne, battered by cold and isolation, now find themselves at the threshold of change, their world expanding as the clouds recede and the outside world draws near. As the day continues, the promise of the clear sky is fulfilled. Allied planes, flying low and steady, begin to release their cargo over the besieged town and its surroundings. Parachutes blossom in the air, their canopies bright against the winter landscape. Bundles of supplies tumble earthward, scattering across fields, roads, and even among the shattered buildings. The process is chaotic and fraught with danger. Some parachutes drift off course, landing in areas exposed to enemy fire or tangled in trees. Others fall within reach of the defenders, who scramble to retrieve them before the enemy can intervene. The supply drops are a spectacle in themselves. Men risk exposure to gather the precious bundles, darting from cover to cover as shells burst nearby. The urgency is palpable. Every crate and package represents a chance for survival. The defenders move quickly, working in teams to haul supplies back to their positions. There is confusion as to where some of the drops have landed, and not every bundle can be recovered. Yet the effort is relentless, driven by the knowledge that these supplies are desperately needed. Within the town, the arrival of supplies brings immediate, tangible changes. Ammunition, long rationed and nearly exhausted, is distributed among the units. Food, scarce and often reduced to scraps, is replenished with new rations. Medical supplies, so vital for the wounded and sick, are unpacked and put to use. The effect is visible in the faces and movements of the defenders. Where there had been resignation and fatigue, there is now a spark of energy. Men share news of what has been found, passing word from position to position. Some laugh or shout in relief, their voices carrying across the snow. The process is not without peril. The enemy continues to shell the town and its outskirts, seeking to disrupt the resupply and inflict further casualties. Some supply bundles are lost to the fields between the lines, unreachable under fire. Yet, the determination of the defenders is undiminished. Accounts from the period describe the chaos and confusion of the drops, the scramble to retrieve supplies, and the hazards faced by those who ventured into exposed areas. The memory of deprivation is still fresh, and every recovered bundle is a small victory. The types of supplies delivered reflect the urgent needs of the defenders. Ammunition is quickly distributed, restoring the ability to hold the line. Food is shared among the hungry, offering a respite from days of meager rations. Medical items are rushed to aid stations, where the wounded await care. The allocation is swift and practical, shaped by necessity and the realities of combat. There is little ceremony, only the focused effort to make the most of what has arrived. The impact on morale is immediate and profound. The knowledge that the outside world has not forgotten Bastogne, that help has arrived from the sky, lifts spirits across the town. Men who had braced themselves for the worst now find reason to hope. The sense of isolation, so heavy in the days of fog and silence, is broken. There are smiles and laughter, even as the dangers persist. The defenders, though still surrounded and under fire, feel a renewed sense of purpose. The supplies are more than material aid, they are a sign that survival is possible. Among the defenders, stories circulate of the supply drops and the efforts to retrieve them. Some recall the sight of parachutes drifting down, the rush to reach them, and the relief of finding food or ammunition inside. Others speak of the risks taken, the shells that fell nearby, and the losses suffered in the attempt. The memory of these moments lingers, shaping the mood of the town as the day draws to a close. As night falls on December 25th, the cold returns with renewed intensity. Temperatures plunge once more, the air biting and sharp. Yet within the shelters and foxholes there is a new sense of resilience. The supplies gathered during the day are put to use, warming bodies and restoring strength. The defenders settle in for another night, their prospects improved by the gifts from above. The following day, December 26th, dawns clear and cold. The sky remains open, the sun casting long shadows across the snow. The routine of the defenders is shaped by the events of the previous day. Positions are checked, supplies are inventoried, and preparations are made for whatever may come. The sense of hope, kindled by the arrival of aid, persists. Yet, the dangers remain ever present. Artillery fire continues to fall, sometimes with deadly accuracy. The enemy is still close, and the threat of attack is undiminished. Within the ranks, morale is noticeably higher. The knowledge that ammunition and food are available, that the wounded can be treated, brings a measure of comfort. Men talk more freely, sharing stories and plans. There is a sense of solidarity, a feeling that they are not alone in their struggle. The hardships of the past days are not forgotten, but they are now balanced by the reality of support from above. The daily routines adapt to the new circumstances. Defensive positions are reinforced, supplies are distributed, and care is taken to make the most of what has been received. The defenders remain vigilant, knowing that the enemy is still active. The sound of artillery and small arms fire punctuates the day, a reminder that the siege is not yet lifted. Yet, the mood is different. There is less despair, more determination. Official communications reflect the changed situation. Orders are given to make use of the new supplies, to hold positions, and to maintain readiness. The leadership recognizes the importance of the airdrops, both for their material value and their effect on morale. The defenders are encouraged to endure, to make the most of the opportunity provided by the clear skies. Among the civilians, too, there is a sense of relief. The arrival of supplies means that food and medicine can be shared, that the sick and wounded have a better chance of survival. The hardships of winter remain, but the prospect of endurance is brighter. Families huddle together in cellars and shelters, sharing what they have, and drawing strength from the knowledge that help has reached them. The sense of hope is tempered by caution. The enemy remains a constant threat, and the outcome is far from certain. Yet the defenders and civilians of Bastogne face the close of December 26th with a renewed sense of possibility. The clear skies have brought more than sunlight. They have brought the promise of survival, the reassurance that they are not forgotten. As darkness falls once more, the town settles into uneasy rest. The cold is as sharp as ever, the dangers undiminished. Yet within the battered walls and frozen fields, there is a quiet determination. The people of Bastogne have endured much, and now, with supplies in hand and hope restored, they prepare to face whatever comes next. The night is long and uncertain, but the spirit of those within the town is stronger than before. The sky above is clear, the stars bright, and for the first time in days, the defenders of Bastogne can look upward with hope. Chapter 10. The road opens to Bastogne, 26 to 27 December, 1944. The air over Bastogne is heavy with tension. Each hour seems to stretch, as those inside the battered town listen for any sign that help might be near. The cold presses in, and the battered buildings offer little shelter from the wind. Rumors drift through the ranks and among the civilians, whispers of American tanks moving somewhere beyond the horizon. Some say they have heard the distant rumble of engines, or the faint echo of gunfire far to the south. Others are less certain, their hope tempered by days of isolation and hardship. The defenders of Bastogne, weary from constant alertness, scan the southern approaches with anxious eyes. There is no certainty, only the restless anticipation that something is changing beyond the ring of enemy lines. Inside the town, information moves in fragments. A runner brings word of possible movement on the roads. A radio operator catches a burst of static, a half-heard message that might mean friendly forces are drawing closer. Each scrap of news is met with a mixture of hope and skepticism. Some men allow themselves to believe that relief is near, while others brace for disappointment. The officers try to maintain order, keeping their units ready for anything. Defensive positions are checked and rechecked. Ammunition is counted, and weapons are cleaned with numb, gloved hands. The threat of another attack remains real, and no one can afford to relax. As the hours pass, the sounds from the south grow more distinct. There are moments when the low thunder of artillery seems to roll closer, and the sharper cracks of small arms fire drift on the wind. Some claim to see flashes on the horizon, brief bursts of light that might be tank guns or mortars. The tension is almost physical, a pressure that settles on every conversation and every movement. In the aid stations, the wounded listen as well, straining to catch any sign that the siege might be ending. The nurses and doctors move quietly among them, offering what comfort they can. Outside, the civilians huddle in cellars and basements, their faces drawn and pale in the candlelight. Children cling to their mothers, asking questions that have no easy answers. Defensive preparations continue, even as hope flickers. Patrols move cautiously along the perimeter, watching for signs of enemy movement. The Germans have not slackened their grip, and in some sectors, their activity seems to increase. Shells fall at irregular intervals, tearing at the frozen ground, and sending shudders through the town. The defenders brace themselves, uncertain whether the next attack will come from the enemy, or from the confusion of battle as friendly forces approach. The anticipation is exhausting, a strain that wears on nerves and tempers alike. Yet beneath the fear and fatigue, there is a growing sense that change is near. The rumors persist, and the sounds from the south refuse to fade. Late in the afternoon of December 26, the long wait comes to an end. Down a battered road leading into Bastogne, the first American tanks appear. Their engines growl as they edge forward, wary of mines and enemy fire. The lead vehicle halts, its crew scanning the ruined landscape for any sign of danger. From the town, a small group of soldiers emerges, moving cautiously toward the newcomers. There is a moment of hesitation, then recognition. Two officers meet in the open, their uniforms dusted with frost and mud. They shake hands, a simple gesture that carries the weight of days spent in isolation and fear. The relief is real, but it is also fragile. The corridor is narrow, and the threat from enemy forces remains close. The first contact is marked by caution. The tanks and infantry of the relief force move carefully, aware that the enemy is still near. The road is littered with debris, and the fields on either side are scarred by shell fire. Communication is hurried but precise, as officers coordinate the movement of vehicles and men. The defenders of Bastogne, gaunt and exhausted, greet their rescuers with a mixture of joy and disbelief. Some embrace, while others simply stand in silence, overcome by the moment. Supplies begin to move through the newly opened route, though the way is far from secure. Ambulances and jeeps carry the wounded out, their drivers navigating the treacherous path with grim determination. The hazards are not over. Enemy fire still rakes the approaches, and mines lie hidden beneath the snow. There are casualties as the first convoys push through, reminders that the battle is not yet finished. Yet the sense of isolation has been broken. Messages are sent back along the line, confirming that contact has been made. Orders are issued to hold the corridor at all costs, and reinforcements begin to move forward. The defenders inside Bastogne, though still wary, allow themselves a measure of hope. The siege is no longer complete, and the possibility of survival grows stronger with each passing hour. As night falls, the reality of the relief settles over the town. The corridor remains narrow and dangerous, but it is open. The wounded are evacuated, and the first new supplies arrive. Food, ammunition, and medical equipment are distributed as quickly as possible. The defenders, many of whom have gone days with little to eat or drink, accept these gifts with quiet gratitude. The mood shifts, subtle but unmistakable. Where there was only grim determination, there is now a flicker of optimism. The men and women of Bastogne, though still surrounded by danger, feel the weight of isolation begin to lift. With the opening of the corridor, routines start to change. The constant fear of being cut off eases, replaced by the urgent work of recovery. Supply trucks rumble through the battered streets, their drivers waving to the soldiers who line the sidewalks. The wounded are carried out with care, their faces showing relief and exhaustion in equal measure. New orders are posted, and units are reorganized to take advantage of the restored link to the outside world. The defenders check their positions, but the sense of desperation has faded. There is still work to be done, but the knowledge that help has arrived brings a new energy to every task. Morale rises in small but meaningful ways. Soldiers share stories of the first tanks to arrive, describing the moment of contact with a mixture of pride and disbelief. Some laugh for the first time in days, their voices hoarse from cold and fatigue. Others simply sit in silence, letting the reality of relief sink in. The civilians too feel the change. In the cellars and shelters, families whisper prayers of thanks. Children venture out into the streets, their eyes wide with curiosity. The town, though still scarred by battle, begins to stir with life once more. The emotional release is profound. For days, every thought has been focused on survival. Now, with the siege broken, there is space for other feelings to emerge. Relief mixes with exhaustion, and some weep openly, unable to contain the flood of emotion. The officers move among their men, offering words of encouragement and gratitude. There are no grand celebrations, only quiet acknowledgements of what has been endured. The sense of community, forged in hardship, is stronger than ever. The practical changes are immediate. Medical teams work through the night, tending to the wounded and preparing them for evacuation. Supply officers oversee the distribution of food and ammunition, their faces lined with fatigue but brightened by hope. The defenders remain vigilant, aware that the enemy is still near, but the fear of total isolation has passed. The town's routines, once dictated by the rhythms of siege, begin to shift. There is talk of rebuilding, of restoring what has been lost. The future remains uncertain, but the present is marked by a sense of possibility. Throughout Bastogne, the atmosphere is transformed. The sound of engines and voices fills the air, replacing the silence of siege. The defenders, though still cautious, move with renewed purpose. The civilians, too, find comfort in the presence of friendly faces and the promise of supplies. The town, battered but unbroken, stands as a testament to endurance and hope. The corridor is narrow, and the threat is not gone, but the people of Bastogne have survived the worst. The relief is real, and the process of recovery has begun. As dawn breaks on December 27, the town is alive with activity. The first rays of sunlight glint off the armor of the tanks that now guard the southern approaches. Soldiers move through the streets, their steps lighter than before. The wounded are loaded onto ambulances, their journey to safety finally underway. Supplies are stacked in courtyards and cellars, a visible sign that the siege has been broken. The mood is subdued but hopeful, a quiet celebration of survival. The defenders remain alert, knowing that danger still lurks beyond the town's edge. Yet the sense of isolation has faded, replaced by a cautious optimism. The people of Bastogne, soldiers and civilians alike, have endured days of fear and hardship. Now, with the corridor open and relief at hand, they allow themselves to hope. The struggle is not over, but the worst has passed. The town stands, battered but defiant, a symbol of resilience in the face of overwhelming odds. In the quiet moments that follow, there is time to reflect on what has been endured. The memories of siege and isolation linger, but they are softened by the knowledge that help has arrived. The people of Bastogne, though still wary, look to the future with renewed strength. The corridor is a lifeline, fragile but precious. The relief it brings is more than physical. It is a restoration of hope, a promise that they are not alone. The town breathes easier, its spirit unbroken, as the long night of siege gives way to the first light of recovery. Chapter 11. Holding After Relief, 27-31 December 1944. The days after the relief of Bastogne do not bring immediate peace. Instead, a tense and uneasy rhythm settles over the battered town and its defenders. The air remains sharp with the echo of artillery, and the ground trembles beneath the weight of continued fighting. On 27 December, as reinforcements from Patton's Third Army arrive, the sense of danger does not vanish. German forces, though pressed back, continue to fight fiercely. The sound of shells bursting in and around Bastogne is a constant reminder that the front is still close, and that the struggle for control is not yet finished. The town itself bears the scars of battle. Walls shattered, roofs torn away, streets littered with debris. Each new day brings the possibility of renewed violence, as American and German armored units clash on the outskirts, and probing attacks test the strength of the lines. Within Bastogne, the mood is wary. Soldiers and civilians alike move with caution, their senses sharpened by days of siege and the knowledge that the enemy remains near. The threat of sudden shellfire keeps people alert, and the memory of recent hardship lingers in every cautious glance. Defensive positions are strengthened, sandbags piled higher, and foxholes deepened. Orders circulate among the troops, emphasizing vigilance and the need to hold firm. The relief has brought hope, but not safety. The front is fluid, and the enemy's intentions remain unclear. Some voices, hushed and weary, express relief at the arrival of reinforcements, but few dare to believe that the danger has truly passed. The atmosphere is thick with uncertainty, and every distant explosion is a reminder that the battle for Bastogne is not yet over. The town's civilians, too, feel the weight of continued fighting. The damage to homes and shops is plain to see, and the risk of further destruction is ever present. Some families take shelter in cellars, listening to the rumble of artillery and the rattle of small arms fire. The streets are quiet, save for the hurried footsteps of messengers and the low voices of soldiers moving between positions. There is no sense of celebration, only a cautious endurance. The days are short and cold, and the nights are filled with uneasy sleep. The relief of Bastogne has brought a measure of hope, but the reality of war remains close at hand. The persistence of combat and the uncertainty of the days ahead weigh heavily on all who remain within the town's battered walls. As the fighting continues, the arrival of new supplies brings a subtle but important change. The narrow corridor opened by Patton's 4th Armored Division allows trucks and jeeps to reach Bastogne, carrying food, ammunition, and medical equipment. The improvement is immediate, if not yet complete. Soldiers who have gone days with little to eat now receive rations, simple meals, but enough to restore some strength. Boxes of bandages and medicine arrive at aid stations, where weary medics tend to the wounded. The sense of deprivation eases, replaced by a cautious optimism that the worst may be over. The weather, which had grounded aircraft and hampered supply efforts, now clears enough for Allied planes to drop additional supplies. Parachutes drift down over the snow, carrying crates of essentials to the waiting troops below. Medical care improves as well. With the arrival of reinforcements, more doctors and nurses are available to treat the injured. Aid stations, once overwhelmed, now have the resources to provide better care. Wounded soldiers are evacuated more quickly, and the most serious cases are given a chance at recovery. The mood in the aid stations shifts from desperation to determination. There is still pain and loss, but also a sense that help is finally at hand. The exhausted defenders of Bastogne, many of whom have not slept properly in days, begin to find moments of rest. Some units are rotated out of the line, if only briefly, to allow their men a chance to recover. The fatigue is deep, and the strain of constant vigilance shows in every face. Eyes are red-rimmed, voices hoarse, movements slow and deliberate. The emotional toll is evident. Soldiers speak quietly among themselves, sharing stories of close calls and lost friends. Some write letters home, their words heavy with exhaustion and relief. Civilians, too, show signs of strain. The ordeal of the siege has left its mark, and the return of supplies does not erase the memory of hunger and fear. Yet there is a change in morale. The knowledge that the outside world has not forgotten them, that help has arrived, brings a measure of comfort. Reports from officers note an improvement in discipline and spirit, even as the hardships continue. Efforts are made to restore basic services. Communications lines are repaired, allowing messages to reach higher headquarters. Vehicles begin to move more freely through the town, clearing debris and delivering supplies. The sense of isolation begins to lift, replaced by a cautious hope that normal routines can resume. Outside, the winter asserts itself once more. Snow drifts pile against the ruined buildings, and the cold seeps into every corner. The front lines, once shifting and uncertain, begin to stabilize. Patrols move out from Bastogne, probing the edges of the American positions and ensuring that the enemy does not return. The sound of gunfire becomes less frequent, replaced by the steady crunch of boots on snow and the low murmur of voices. The immediate crisis has passed, but the work of holding the line continues. Soldiers dig in, reinforcing their positions and preparing for whatever may come next. The routines of winter warfare return: guard duty, patrols, the endless task of keeping warm in the bitter cold. Within the town, life slowly resumes its familiar patterns. Soldiers and civilians alike begin to repair what they can. Broken windows are covered with boards, and makeshift repairs are made to damaged roofs. The streets, once deserted, see more activity as people venture out in search of food or news. There is a sense of community, a shared determination to endure. Interactions between soldiers and townspeople become more frequent, as both groups adjust to the new reality. Some share a cup of coffee, or a few quiet words, grateful for the simple comforts of companionship. The hardships of the past days are not forgotten, but there is a sense that life can go on. The weather remains a constant challenge. Snow falls steadily, blanketing the town in white and muffling the sounds of war. The cold is intense, and fires burn in every hearth. Soldiers huddle together for warmth, their breath visible in the frigid air. The routines of winter are familiar, if not welcome. There is little time for celebration, but some find solace in small acts of kindness: a shared meal, a letter from home, a quiet moment of reflection. The sense of crisis recedes, replaced by the steady rhythm of daily life. The front is quiet, but the memory of recent danger lingers. As the year draws to a close, Bastogne settles into a cautious normalcy. The immediate threat has diminished, and the routines of winter have returned. The town remains scarred by battle, but its people endure. The soldiers who defended Bastogne find moments of rest, their spirits lifted by the arrival of supplies and the knowledge that they are no longer alone. The civilians, too, begin to rebuild, drawing strength from the resilience of their community. The days are short and cold, but there is a sense of hope in the air. The ordeal of the past weeks has left its mark, but life goes on. The front is stable, and the town of Bastogne, battered but unbroken, faces the new year with quiet determination.